We have some time now for discussions and for questions from the floor and for debate amongst our panelists. But I would like to give you a couple of my own take-home messages I got from all our presenters this morning. First of all, from Dr. Lagranci was that we have to be proactive. We cannot sit and wait for things to come down upon us. And not only be proactive, but also band us all together. You know that example of a single reed can crack easily, but if you take a bundle of reeds, you can't crack them. So that is what I got from Sarah. And if you look at what Sarah presented this morning, that systematic approach, not a haphazard approach. We even got that same issue from Ellen today, and I think from Andre, that you have to be systematic in your approach when you tackle these major issues. What I got from Professor Andre Jooste was that we have this nebulous cloud of acts and regulations. And I know I work on the environmental side as well, and I had a discussion last week with my colleagues at Environmental Affairs that we live in a country with a plethora on acts and regulations. Now coming back to today, it becomes technically impossible to negotiate your way through all these regulations, how they fit each other, how they influence each other. And maybe at some stage we need to get to a debate on how do we rationalize the acts and regulations that impact upon agricultural production. What Andre also said, very important, is it links on what Alan said, and I'll also link with what Sabu said to us this morning, is if there's a policy, follow the process. Don't jump around like a little bee between different flowers. You go with a mission, but you have to follow a certain route and a certain process. Otherwise, you will not get to the objective. And unfortunately, what Andre said is, this thing about money, there's never money. And if we don't have money, you can't make the process of it, because everything in life in the modern world, we're not cave people anymore. We live in a modern world, so money makes the world go round. And that is, to me, a bit of a scary thought, because if we don't have the money, what do we do? So we have to go and get the money from somewhere. What I heard from Mr. Kamala from DTIC, very encouraging, that we sometimes think agriculture department only. We might think about health department, we might think about environmental affairs department. Meanwhile, we forget about the fact that we've got this wonderful DTIC that go out there and defend the agricultural industry on the behalf of the producers and our own plant science industry and behalf of the consumers. So we need to get a closer tie between us as a sector and the DTIC and work together. And we heard this today throughout all the presentations. You have to work together. And to conclude my little summary from all our presenters this morning is what Alan said to me, so many things important. And what I got out of all my reading up about the EU Green Deal and the classification of things called CMRs, there's a lot of anecdotal and a lot of sort of taking little bits of piece information, but we don't have that hardcore scientific, irrefutable scientific evidence to say yes or no for a compound. So getting the research done, again, it will cost money. But if you don't do it, you don't have a leg to stand on. We also heard throughout this morning's presentations that the food insecurity is something we haven't batted enough on from this perspective on addressing the EU Green Deal and all the challenges. We also heard from a lot of people this morning, from early morning to this session now, that there's not enough, call it people, for want of a better word, or countries that challenge the EU. Now I'm glad to hear that there's already a discussion between Brazil and the USA, maybe bringing in Canada, and South Africa is being mooted by Alan as becoming another driving force in there to challenge the EU. Because if you don't challenge somebody, they will go ahead with their policy, become dictatorial. So that's something we have to capitalize on. And coming back again to this collaboration, coalitions, form coalitions, like-minded people get together and you put together the same sort of thought process and you get the same sort of collaboration going and get your view across to the people by using an advocacy person like Alan. And yeah, we've heard also in my discussion with Alan about 2 weeks ago together with Elreza was the world or Africa is looking upon Morocco up there, Kenya down there, South Africa as being the lead countries. So we don't have a choice. We have to get together with our other African colleagues and put a point forward towards the EU to at least influence, and you heard Alan said, we can still, where did I write this? The EU Green Deal is happening. It's not a case of it's not going to happen. It is happening currently. But we can still use the wonderful word shape. Shape the details. Change the details. And what Alan said, if you don't start now, by the time you wake up, the deal is done. So you keep on shaping and shaping and shaping on a day-to-day basis and get that engagement and going. So I've spoken enough now. So I would like to know whether there is any question maybe from the audience. Just raise your hand. Fani there at the back, please, and then we can have, there are many questions. So keep your questions short and brief, please, and we'll ask our panel members then to respond to a particular question.
Okay. Thank you, Gerald, and thank you, Sarah, and all the speakers for this program, session 2. It's Mulebati from Koteva AgriScience. I just wanted to put a comment on the presentation that Sarah made regarding the co-formulants that may be phased out as they meet the criteria CMR 1A and 1B. As we all know that co-formulants are molecules that are really difficult to make classifications on GHS, as well as the EU have put a soft classification in for co-formulants with also limits for them. Sarah, do you think we should also look into the limits that the Department of Labor has put in for some of the co-formulants that are listed?
Okay, let me then ask Dr. Lagrange to respond to that. So you've got to put your chemistry hat on now, please, Sarah.
Okay, hear me. Okay. I think we should look at all the information that could be relevant. So yes, I agree with you. We haven't looked at it yet, but we should then also do that.
Thank you. If you look at a pesticide in a drum, the formulation, people always talk about the active and the non-actives or the co-formulants or excipients, like they use the word in animal health. As a chemist, to me, there's no difference. They all have a function to play. Some of them might have more of a biological function, some of them more than a chemical function. So we cannot shy away, Molobasi, from looking at everything in a container and put it into our classification sieve and see what comes at the bottom, which has to be addressed. So hopefully some of them will stay above the sieve. Some of them will fall below the sieve, and we have to take them and say, what can we do about them, or can we reclassify them, and stuff like this. So hopefully that will address your question. Okay, next question. Is it Fani at the back from Corteva? Thank you, Fani.
Yes, thanks, Gerard. We decided that Corteva would now dominate the floor. Now, question two, well, probably any of the panelists, but maybe Dr. Lagrange and Dr. Hardacre. You've referred to Brazil, the USA also beginning to push back, but the Green Deal and its impacts also will play in on our competitors. I'm thinking of Chile in the southern hemisphere. Are we seeing, is anybody working on synergies with them? Because they will be impacted in the same way.
Who can I pass the question on to? Ellen?
I can maybe take a start with a response. I'm not sure if you've seen, the USDA has very early after the introduction of the farm to fork measures put out a first impact assessment, and then they did a full trade analysis. And they actually looked at every single one of the EU's trade partners, and they made an assessment. Would they still... Okay, I'm back. No? Yes? Good. They did an assessment of, I think, 37 of the EU's trade partners, and they actually assessed, will they continue to trade with the EU or not? And what would then be by product? So they have done a full analysis of where they think this is going to go competitively. Other people may have done this, but they have not published it in the way that the US has. So when you talk about the competitive element, I think you're entirely correct. It is for 100% for sure that the US is aware of what it thinks that situation is how it's going to unfold, and they will be playing their cards accordingly. Others, I'm not sure, but I completely agree with you. We talk about this in a binary sense, but this is obviously a very competitive environment. So the US for sure, others, my guess, some of them yes, many of them no.
That's the EU tapping into our conference. There's a comment there from right at the back, please. Give us your name, please, before you speak.
Thank you. Sean Moore, Citrus Research International. Dr. Hardacre, thank you. Very encouraging presentation. You listed major concerns or barriers to success with the implementation of the European Green Deal, but you didn't mention in our number one barrier to success, which I know is shared by other industries in the country and around the world, and that is that we find ourselves sandwiched between debilitating, irrational, and often unscientifically based EU phytosanitary regulations on the one hand, and on the other hand, the Green Deal type regulations which require us to reduce our chemical pesticide usage. And if those irrational and unscientific phytosanitary regulations are not addressed, it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for us to comply with the requirements of the Green Deal. I'm sure Paul Hardman will say more about it this afternoon in his address.
Yeah, so if I think I'm going to borrow a slide that you actually presented where you put down that I think here we have, you could pick any number of issues. CropLife Europe was trying to manage 42 different files that would have an impact on the industry. And the European industry was struggling to understand itself what the priorities were. What was more important? Because it could be a headline, the big headline, reduction in a pesticide target, okay? But it was often insidious details in other bits of legislation that were going to be much more painful. So I think one of the things in terms of an exercise of looking at what does this mean for South Africa is, what are the priority areas? Because if you're talking about this from all of the different fora in which the EU is active, and you're looking at all of the different issues, you're going to come up with a horrible matrix that you can't possibly take forward. So, you know, what are the top 3 absolute must-wins? And then see, do those correlate? That's what we're going to be trying to do a little bit next year. Do those correlate with the 3 Kenyan must-wins? There's going to be some horizontality, and that's what we need to find. But yes, I apologise for missing off. I suspect I missed 24 other ones off, if I'm honest. So take that as my list of 5.
Yeah, sure. Just to emphasize that is our number one barrier. The other thing as well is you say bring facts, don't bring anecdotes, bring facts. We have done that, and it seems to make very little difference.
Then it has to be coordinated with others. I think, yeah, I hear you. There's no magic bullet here. It's not just because South Africa's going to turn up with a great big dossier of facts that suddenly something's going to happen. No, I think this is going to have to be done in conjunction with others in a very coordinated way. Then you come to how it's done. But yes, it's the basis. From that you need to build.
Thank you. Let me see on this side of the audience. No hands up here. So then let us take the last question right in the corner at the back, please.
My question here is,
They're just trying to de-link the EU from this discussion here, so give a second, please.
Okay, that's it. My big question is, before I start, let's take this Congress and we put it in a kind of an umbrella of only focus on South Africa's situation, instead of to see what other countries actually do behind the scenes to make this European deal possible. And in South Africa, as a small role player like me in the holistic agricultural business like seed, chemicals, and also nutritional. As a small role player, the question is this what we're actually talking today possible? And if you look at South Africa economy situations, and I must say, Professor Andre Jooste, with his great presentation, actually summarized the challenges and the task what we will have to bring this real world after the unreal world. In South Africa, I think, to get the real world, I think it will take quite a lot of time, and therefore all the role players have to work together to be stronger together. But I think to take these challenges, I think we have to take in consideration that we need everybody in South Africa to make this dream true. Lastly, I want to say, maybe to make this possible, I think we have to bring Tom Cruise and start a new movie, Mission Impossible, with the subject, European Real Deal Possible. Is it possible or not? Thank you.
Thank you for that last comment. I think what came out this morning from the very beginning when Rod introduced the Congress to you and right up to now, we've heard a very important thing is that idea of collaborating and grouping yourself together to address an issue. And one of our speakers in the first session made the comment that nothing is impossible. I think it's your mindset. If you have this sort of attitude of standing back and waiting for somebody else to do it, not going to achieve the objective. But if you say we are going to address the issue, we are going to overcome it. Maybe we don't have a total win, but if we have an 80-20 type of win, already we won part of the battle, or main part of the battle. And if I may make a concluding remark here, is something that came out of Andre Jooste's presentation, which struck me like a bolt of lightning. We have the advantage in South Africa that our farmers are not used to being subsidized. In other words, they're very innovative in the way they think. And over the past couple of months, I've been onto farms with Elrita, to one of the big young farmers, and the way the guys innovate and think is a massive advantage. Compared to the European Union, the farmers have lived on subsidies for ages, for generations. So they're not innovative. And I think that is something we shouldn't forget. As Africans of nature, doesn't matter which cultural background, we are innovative. So let us use that innovative mindset of ourselves in South Africa and get ourselves together as an industry. We tie ourselves in with our state institutions and governments and parastatals, and we work together to overcome the hurdles of the EU Green Deal. Because we heard again, how many times? It is there. Make a plan to overcome it. And with that, I would like to conclude our session again to thank our participants. Very good presentations and a lot of food for thought, and unfortunately, a lot extra work for us. Now, I'm going to close the session now. A lot more work for us. And Alan threw something at me which I'm a bit scared about. You said South Africa must start doing more work. Man, we're already working hard, but we'll take that challenge. We'll chat to you, and we'll take it forward for the benefit of our industry and our farmers and for the nation. Thank you very much.